The fork trembled in my hand as I stared at the screen of my phone, the words burning into my retinas like acid. Get up and leave. Don't say anything to your parents. Mom was mid-sentence. Something about the new neighbors and their loud music. When the text arrived, Dad nodded along, cutting his steak with the same methodical precision he'd used for 37 years of marriage. The dining room felt suddenly suffocating. The familiar warmth of home twisted into something sinister. I knew that number. I'd memorized it 3 months ago when everything fell apart. "Honey, you look pale," Mom said, her fork pausing halfway to her mouth. "Are you feeling all right?" The concern in her voice, genuine, motherly, protective, made my stomach churn. How long had they known? How long had they been lying to my face, sitting across from me at this very table, pretending everything was normal, while my entire life crumbled around me? "I'm fine," I managed, though my voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. I set my phone face down on the table, but the words continued to pulse behind my eyelids. Don't say anything to your parents. But why not? What were they afraid I might say? 3 months ago, I thought I had everything. Sarah Chen, my business partner of 5 years, my best friend since college, the woman I trusted with my dreams and my future. We'd built Meridian Marketing from nothing, 2 kids with laptops and limitless ambition, working 18-hour days in her garage, surviving on ramen and stubborn hope. When the contracts started coming in, when we moved into a real office, when we hired our first employee, I thought we were unstoppable. Sarah handled the business side while I focused on creative strategy. We were the perfect team, complementary strengths, shared vision, until I discovered the shell company. It had been an accident, really. A misfiled tax document that revealed a second set of books. A parallel business structure that funneled 70% of our revenue into accounts I'd never seen. Sarah's signature on documents that committed my intellectual property, my client relationships, my 5 years of sweat and sacrifice to a company I didn't even know existed. When I confronted her, she didn't even have the decency to look surprised. "You were always too naive for business," she'd said, not looking up from her laptop. I did what needed to be done to protect our investment. Our investment? This is theft, Sarah. This is survival. You think your pretty campaigns and feel-good marketing win clients? Money wins clients. Connections win clients. And I made sure we had both. The betrayal had been devastating enough, but what came next destroyed me completely. Within a week, I was locked out of my own company. Fired from the business I'd built with my own hands. The clients I'd cultivated for years suddenly wouldn't return my calls. Other agencies in the city began treating me like toxic waste. Sarah had been thorough. Not content with stealing my company, she'd systematically destroyed my reputation, spreading carefully crafted lies about my reliability, my professionalism, my mental stability. I was blacklisted from my own industry, my career reduced to radioactive ash. But the cruelest cut came when I learned who had helped her. "Marcus seems distracted tonight," Dad said, gesturing with his knife toward my untouched plate. "The meatloaf's getting cold." I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in months. When had those lines around his eyes deepened? When had his hair gone so completely gray? He looked older, but there was something else. A weight in his expression, a careful way he avoided my direct gaze. The phone buzzed again. Another text. They're listening. They know about the photos. My blood turned to ice water. Photos. There were photos. The detective I'd hired, Jake Morrison, had been worth every penny of my dwindling savings. While I'd been drowning in self-pity and cheap wine, he'd been methodically documenting the truth. Sarah's meetings with my father at coffee shops across town, the wire transfers from his consulting firm to her shell company, the emails between them discussing my emotional instability and the need for intervention, my own father, the man who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd stayed up all night helping with science fair projects, who'd cried at my college graduation. He'd been feeding information to Sarah for months before she made her move. Client lists, financial projections, strategic plans, everything she needed to cut me out of my own life. The photos showed them shaking hands outside First National Bank the day before I was fired, both of them smiling. "I should go," I said quietly, pushing back from the table. "But you've barely touched your food," Mom protested. "And we haven't had a chance to really talk in weeks. They're listening." The text had said they were listening, but how? I glanced around the familiar dining room, looking for anything out of place. The new lamp on the sideboard. The renovated built-ins where Dad kept his books. Had they been recording our conversations? How long had I been performing for an invisible audience? Another buzz. "Trust me. Leave now. The revenge you planned starts tonight." My hands began to shake. Morrison had promised he could destroy them both, but I'd told him to wait. Told him I needed time to think it through. Apparently, he'd grown tired of waiting. "I really should go," I repeated, standing up so quickly my chair scraped against the hardwood floor. "I have an early morning." Dad's eyes followed me with predatory alertness. "What kind of early morning? Job interview?" Job interview? The question was casual, but there was something underneath it. Information gathering. Intelligence for his other daughter, the one who'd stolen my life, while he helped hold the door open. "Something like that," I said, grabbing my jacket from the hallway closet. Behind me, I heard them talking in urgent whispers. My parents, conspiring in the house where I'd eaten thousands of meals, opened Christmas presents, celebrated every milestone of my life. The house that no longer felt like home. I drove aimlessly for an hour, my phone buzzing with increasingly frantic texts from Morrison. Finally, I pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour diner and called him back. "Where the hell have you been?" He growled without preamble. "We're running out of time." "What are you talking about? Time for what?" "Sarah's moving the money tonight. Offshore accounts, shell companies in the Caymans. If we don't act in the next 6 hours, we'll never trace where it went." I stared through the diner's grimy windows at families eating late dinners. Normal people with normal problems. "How do you know?" "Because I've been monitoring their communications for weeks. Your father's been helping her liquidate assets. They're both planning to disappear by tomorrow night." The words hit me like physical blows. Disappear. They were going to disappear together, leaving me with nothing but questions and an empty bank account. "What do you need me to do?" "I need you to get access to your father's home computer. The financial records I need are on his hard drive, encrypted but recoverable. Can you get back inside the house?" I thought about my parents, probably washing dishes right now, discussing my strange behavior over decaf coffee. They'd given me a key when I was 16. As far as I knew, they'd never asked for it back. "Yeah," I said. "I can get back in." "Good. I'll meet you there at midnight. Park 2 blocks away and wait for my signal." The line went dead, leaving me alone with the weight of what I was about to do. Breaking into my childhood home, to steal evidence that would destroy my father and the woman who'd been like a second daughter to him. It felt like the final, irreversible step into a world I'd never wanted to enter. But they'd made the choice for me. At 11:47 p.m., I sat in my car on Maple Street, watching the house where I'd grown up. All the lights were off except the porch lamp, the same warm yellow glow that had welcomed me home from dates and college visits and late nights with friends. Now it felt like a warning beacon. Morrison materialized beside my car like a ghost, all black clothing and predatory confidence. "They're both asleep," he whispered. "Bedroom lights went off 20 minutes ago. Your father's study is on the first floor, back of the house?" I nodded, unable to trust my voice. "Computer's probably password protected. But I brought some toys. We'll be in and out in 15 minutes. The key still worked." Of course it did. My parents had never been the type to change locks or install security systems. They trusted the world to be as honest as they pretended to be. We crept through the kitchen where I'd eaten breakfast every morning before school, past the living room where we'd watched movies and argued about politics, and celebrated New Year's Eve with sparkling cider. Every familiar shadow felt like an accusation. Dad's study was exactly as I remembered. Dark wood paneling, law books, the same leather chair where he'd helped me with homework, and listened to my dreams about running my own business someday. The irony was suffocating. Morrison went to work on the computer while I stood guard, my heart hammering so loudly I was sure it would wake the whole neighborhood. Files flashed across the screen: bank statements, email exchanges, legal documents that painted a picture of systematic, calculated betrayal. Jesus Christ, Morrison breathed. Your father's been skimming from his clients too. This isn't just about your company, he's been running a securities fraud scheme for years. Sarah was just the latest victim he could exploit. I stared at the screen, watching my father's crimes scroll past in neat columns of stolen money and forged signatures. He wasn't just a traitor. He was a career criminal who'd been using his daughter's trust fund and his wife's retirement savings to cover his tracks. How much? I whispered. Conservative estimate. 3.7 million, spread across dozens of accounts and shell companies. He's been stealing from everyone. Clients, family, business partners. Sarah probably doesn't even know she's working with a professional thief. A floorboard creaked overhead. We both froze, listening to the sound of footsteps moving across the bedroom floor. The bathroom door opened and closed, water running through old pipes. Almost done, Morrison muttered, fingers flying across the keyboard. Just need to copy these financial records and... The study light blazed on. Hello, Marcus. My father stood in the doorway, wearing his old blue bathrobe and an expression of profound sadness. Not surprise, not anger, just bone-deep weariness, as if he'd been waiting for this moment for months. Morrison's hand moved toward something inside his jacket, but Dad just shook his head. No need for theatrics, Mr. Morrison. I know exactly why you're here. He walked to his desk chair and sat down heavily, suddenly looking every one of his 68 years. I suppose you found what you were looking for. I stared at him, this stranger wearing my father's face, and felt something break inside my chest. How long have you known we were coming? Since you left dinner. You never were good at hiding your emotions, son. I taught you to be honest, remember? Sometimes I wonder if that was a mistake. The casual cruelty of it, the way he could twist my integrity into a character flaw, made me want to scream. You stole my company. You helped Sarah destroy my life. I helped Sarah save your life, he said quietly. You were never cut out for business, Marcus. Too trusting, too idealistic. You would have lost everything within 5 years anyway. This way, at least Sarah could salvage something from the wreckage. By stealing from me? By protecting you from your own limitations. He looked past me to Morrison, who was still copying files with mechanical efficiency. I don't suppose there's any point in asking you to stop. Morrison didn't look up from the screen. Your son hired me to find the truth. That's what I'm doing. The truth. Dad laughed bitterly. The truth is that I've been stealing money for 12 years to pay for your mother's cancer treatments. The truth is that Sarah found out 6 months ago and threatened to expose me unless I helped her consolidate your business assets. The truth is that I chose to sacrifice your company rather than let your mother die in a county hospital. The words hit me like a physical assault. Mom's cancer had been in remission for 3 years. She'd beaten it. We'd celebrated. We'd moved on. Or so I thought. She doesn't know, Dad continued, watching my face. The treatments that saved her life weren't covered by insurance. Experimental drugs, private specialists, clinical trials that cost more than I made in 5 years. I've been juggling debt and stealing from client accounts just to keep her alive. You could have told me, I whispered. I would have helped. With what money? You were living paycheck to paycheck, pouring everything into a business that was hemorrhaging cash. Sarah was the only one with access to real capital, and she demanded a price for her silence. Morrison looked up from the computer. Got it all. Bank records, email exchanges, transaction histories. This is enough to put both of you away for 20 years. I stared at my father, trying to reconcile the criminal with the man who'd read me bedtime stories and taught me to throw a curveball. Why didn't you just tell me the truth from the beginning? Because I knew you'd do something stupid and heroic. You'd try to save everyone, destroy yourself in the process, and your mother would die anyway. He stood up slowly, joints creaking with age and guilt. At least this way, she got in to live. That was worth any price. Including my life? You're 28 years old with a brilliant mind and no criminal record. You can rebuild. I'm 68 with late-stage diabetes and a heart condition. I've got maybe 5 good years left. The math wasn't complicated. Morrison finished copying the files and closed the laptop. We should go. I'll need 12 hours to organize this evidence before we contact the FBI. But I couldn't move. I stood there in my father's study, surrounded by the debris of our family's lies, trying to understand how love could be twisted into such devastating betrayal. What happens now? I asked. Dad shrugged. Now you make a choice. You can destroy me, destroy Sarah, probably destroy your mother when she finds out what I did to keep her alive. Or you can walk away and let sleeping dogs lie. Those aren't the only options, aren't they? He looked at me with something that might have been pride. Fies lied. It was benefied. You always were smarter than I gave you credit for. I turned to Morrison. Give me the files. He hesitated. Marcus, if you're thinking of making some kind of deal, give me the files. Reluctantly, he handed over the USB drive, containing everything we'd copied. $3.7 million worth of evidence. My father's crimes, Sarah's theft, years of systematic fraud, documented in meticulous detail. I walked to Dad's desk and opened the bottom drawer, the one where he'd always kept his most important papers, birth certificates, insurance policies, the deed to the house. I dropped the USB drive inside and closed the drawer. What are you doing? Morrison demanded. Buying time. I looked at my father, this flawed, desperate, loving criminal who destroyed my life to save my mother's. You have 48 hours to make this right. Return the money to your clients, work out a payment plan with Sarah, figure out how to clean up this mess without destroying Mom. And if I can't, then I'll give Morrison everything he needs to send you both to prison. Dad studied my face for a long moment. You'd do that? To your own father? You'd steal from your own son? He nodded slowly. Ha! Fair enough. Morrison grabbed my arm. This is insane. You're letting them destroy evidence, obstruct justice. I'm giving them a chance to do the right thing. I pulled free of his grip. Sometimes that's more powerful than punishment. We left the same way we came, through the kitchen and out the back door, 2 shadows disappearing into the suburban night. But everything had changed. The house where I'd grown up would never be home again, no matter what happened next. Morrison was furious. This is professional suicide. I'm a licensed investigator, not some vigilante thug. I can't be party to extortion and... Then don't be. I stopped beside his car and looked back at the dark house where my parents were probably lying awake, staring at the ceiling and contemplating the ruins of their lives. Send me a bill for services rendered. Our business relationship is over. What about Sarah? What about your company? I'll handle Sarah myself. He drove away, shaking his head, probably already composing the report that would distance himself from my decision. I didn't blame him. From his perspective, I'd just chosen family loyalty over justice, sentiment over law. But he was wrong. I hadn't chosen loyalty. I'd chosen leverage. The next morning, I called Sarah. Marcus? She sounded genuinely surprised to hear from me. How did you get this number? We need to meet. I don't think that's a good idea. My lawyers advised me not to speak with you directly. Your lawyers don't know about the offshore accounts. Silence. Then, what are you talking about? Life. I can. Meridian Holdings, LLC. The shell company you've been using to funnel money through the Cayman Islands. The one that's going to disappear tomorrow night along with $3.7 million in stolen assets. More silence. When she finally spoke, her voice was carefully controlled. Where do you want to meet? We met at Riverside Park, the same place where we'd celebrated our first major client 5 years ago. She looked older, more polished, wearing the kind of expensive suit that my money had probably bought. But there was fear in her eyes, and that told me everything I needed to know. How long have you known? She asked, without preamble. Long enough. I sat down on the bench facing the river, the same bench where we'd planned our future and sworn we'd always be partners. The question is, what we're going to do about it. She sat beside me, careful to maintain distance. What do you want? I want my company back. That's not possible. The legal transfers are legal transfers based on forged documents and fraudulent financial statements. I have evidence of securities fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit theft, and about a dozen other felonies that would put you away for the rest of your life. Her composure finally cracked. Marcus, you don't understand. It's not just about the money. Your father. My father made his choice. Now you get to make yours. I pulled out a folder containing copies of Morrison's evidence and set it on the bench between us. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to transfer 51% ownership of Meridian Marketing back to me. You're going to return all intellectual property rights. You're going to publicly retract every lie you've told about my professional competence. And, in return, I don't destroy you. She flipped through the documents, her face growing paler with each page. This is blackmail. This is justice. You stole my life, Sarah. I'm offering you a chance to give it back voluntarily. What about your father? This evidence implicates him too. My father's fate is between him and his conscience. Your fate is between you and me. She closed the folder and looked out at the river. We were friends once. We were partners. You decided to make it personal. I never wanted to hurt you. The business was failing, Marcus. We were hemorrhaging clients, missing deadlines, making promises we couldn't keep. Someone had to make the hard decisions. Someone had to steal my company. Someone had to save it. The words came out sharper than she'd intended. You were so busy being creative and idealistic that you couldn't see we were going under. I did what I had to do. You did what was profitable. There's a difference. She was quiet for a long time, watching joggers and dog walkers move along the riverside path. Finally, she said, what guarantee do I have that you won't use this evidence anyway? The same guarantee I had that you wouldn't steal my company. She laughed bitterly. So, none at all. None at all. Welcome to the world of trust, Sarah. Population, 0. She stood up and smoothed her skirt. I'll need 3 days to arrange the transfers. You have 24 hours. That's not enough time to. 24 hours. Or I go to the FBI. I picked up the folder and stood to face her. Oh, and Sarah? If you try to run, if you try to hide assets, if you breathe wrong in the next 24 hours, I will hunt you down and destroy every aspect of your life until you're begging on street corners. Are we clear? For a moment, she looked like the scared college student I'd known 15 years ago, overwhelmed and desperate, and completely out of her depth. Then the mask slipped back into place. Crystal clear. She walked away without looking back, her heels clicking against the sidewalk with mechanical precision. I watched her go and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, no closure. Just the hollow recognition that some betrayals leave scars that never fully heal. My phone buzzed. A text from Dad. Can we talk? I deleted it without responding. That night, I sat in my apartment surrounded by legal documents and transfer agreements, watching my company return to me one signature at a time. Sarah had been efficient. I'd give her that every intellectual property right, every client contract, every asset she'd stolen, had been returned with bureaucratic precision. But it felt empty, hollow, like winning a war by destroying the country you'd fought to save. My phone rang. Morrison's number. I heard about the transfers, he said without preamble. Smart move. Risky, but smart. Is that a compliment? It's an acknowledgement. You got what you wanted without destroying your family. Not everyone could have pulled that off. What about my father? That's between you and him. I'm out of it as of tonight. Good. Send me your final bill. Already did. Check your email. There was a pause. For what it's worth, I think you made the right choice. Justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes, it's about giving people a chance to do better. After he hung up, I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Sarah was probably packing her belongings and planning her next move. Somewhere else, my parents were lying awake, wondering if their son would forgive them or destroy them. I had my company back. I had evidence of their crimes. I had power over all of them. But what I didn't have was peace. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house for the last time. Dad was waiting in the kitchen, dressed in his best suit, as if he were going to court or a funeral. I returned the money, he said, before I could speak. Every penny I stole from my clients. Cleaned out my retirement accounts. Took out a second mortgage on the house, but I paid it all back. And Mom? Doesn't know. Yet. He poured 2 cups of coffee and set one in front of me. I'll tell her tonight. She deserves to know the truth. What will you tell her? That I was a coward who chose theft over honesty. That I destroyed our son's life rather than trust him to help save hers. He sat down across from me, looking older than I'd ever seen him. That I'm sorry isn't enough to fix what I've done. I stared into my coffee, searching for words that might bridge the gap between us. Why didn't you trust me? Because I've spent 68 years learning that good intentions don't pay medical bills. Because I couldn't bear the thought of asking you to sacrifice your dreams for mine. Because I was a proud, stupid old man who thought he could steal his way out of an impossible situation. You almost succeeded. Almost isn't good enough. Not when it costs you everything that matters. I pulled the USB drive out of my pocket and set it on the table between us. Morrison's evidence. Every crime you committed, every lie you told, every dollar you stole. It's all there. Dad stared at the drive. What do you want me to do with it? I want you to take it to the district attorney's office. I want you to confess to everything and accept whatever punishment they decide to give you. And if I refuse, then I'll do it for you. He picked up the drive and turned it over in his hands. You know this will destroy your mother. The scandal, the legal fees, losing the house when I can't work anymore. Mom's stronger than you think. She survived cancer. She can survive this too. With your help? That was the real question, wasn't it? Could I forgive them enough to help pick up the pieces? Could I choose love over justice? Family over revenge? I don't know, I said honestly. Ask me again after the trial. Dad nodded and slipped the USB drive into his jacket pocket. That's fair. I stood up to leave, then paused at the kitchen door. Dad? Yeah? I understand why you did it. That doesn't make it right, but I understand. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, I saw tears in his eyes. That's more than I deserve. Number? It's exactly what you deserve. Nothing more, nothing less. I left him sitting at the kitchen table, holding his coffee cup with shaking hands and contemplating the wreckage of our family. It would be months before I saw him again, years before we could have a conversation without lawyers present. But we'd get there eventually. Broken things could be repaired if you were willing to do the work. 6 months later, I was sitting in my restored office at Meridian Marketing, reviewing contracts and rebuilding the client base that Sarah had poisoned against me. It was slow work, trust. Once broken, was hard to earn back, but it was honest work. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Saw the news about your dad's sentencing. I'm sorry. Sarah. Even after everything, she couldn't resist the urge to twist the knife. I deleted the text without responding and went back to work. Some ghosts were better left unexorcised. Outside my window, the city hummed with the energy of people pursuing their dreams and making their compromises and learning to live with the consequences of both. I was one of them, now scarred, but not broken, betrayed, but not defeated. The revenge I'd planned had turned into something else entirely, a reckoning that forced everyone to confront the truth about who they really were. In the end, that had been more powerful than any punishment I could have devised. My company was mine again. My future was my own to build, and that was enough.